Welcome back, everyone. Today I've got my friend Katie with us. Most of you will probably be aware of who Katie is and what she does, but a really quick intro to Katie. It's Katie McPhee. She's been a marketing leader. She is an AI whiz, as some people might call it. And I'm really looking forward to uncovering and unlocking loads of Katie's knowledge to help you on your journey in 2026. So welcome, Katie.
Thanks, Danny.
Katie, do you want to let people know where we really are with marketing at startups, and like what would you say the current state of play is for marketing and startups?
Yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting point in time. Like, you only have to look at the number of AI companies that have boomed into existence in the past couple of years. I think there's over 100,000. And so this really changes what it means to be a marketeer in a startup. Because in the 2010s, when I first moved into startups myself, when I was working with Eventbrite, your main challenge was to get a few people to know about you, to break in and to communicate about the technology. But where that's changed now is that a different layer of differentiation is needed. Like, we all know what AI is, but what is it that the value that your specific company and product brings is going to be like the communication challenge for marketeers in startups going forwards.
We both have worked in and around you're in the AI space. I've worked in and around companies going into and starting their journey in AI. And a quick observation I've had is there's so much paid search for AI companies. I've never seen it in startups like it. As soon as you search for one tool, every competitor comes up. So it's definitely like one of the most aggressive spaces I've seen. Is there something that that you've observed within startup space, within marketing, that's something that's new or something that sort of sprung up that you weren't really expecting?
In terms of channels or?
Yeah, channels or just general approach, because AI and marketing is new, right? It's only really a couple of years old. Is there anything that sort of surprised you since your 2010 era of marketing?
Well, I think it's encouraging to see the resurgence of community and the resurgence of connection and IRL. There's a lot of noise about Reddit as a channel of importance because that's what the LLMs are scraping to get their intel. And so there's kind of this dash to create a Reddit strategy, but actually you can't really fake it on Reddit. You actually have to be providing genuine community value. So I think it's interesting to see how that's playing out online and how that will continue to do so. I think secondly, at the high end with enterprise, this return, this post-COVID, return to field marketing, all the roles that are emerging for events teams, but actually bringing people together, which again, it forces you to curate high quality events, high quality connecting opportunities. I've got to think that all is in the benefit actually of the end users. It changes the challenge for marketeers, but actually it feels like a shift back to a slightly more authentic way of connecting instead of just let's spend 6 figures on paid search and spray and pray and hope for the best. Obviously our feeds are still going to be full of AI slop, if you will, and curated avatars just because it is so cheap to test. And I think so many people are just going to think, why not? But alongside that, the proliferation of much higher quality connecting community opportunities definitely gives me hope that the times for marketeers on the horizon.
You've done a lot of speaking and a lot of engagements recently, and also that connects in with the events and curating the best experiences for people. Have you found that it's shifted much, or have you found that people are asking much more pertinent questions because the industry is getting harder, or it is proliferating and changing? Have you sort of experienced anything like that?
I'm getting asked a lot about AI, what AI tools I use. Someone asked me the other week how I learned AI, which was an interesting one. So I guess there is that that desire that everyone has right now. People, I think, are hungry to attend events, specifically around AI, because there is this like need and this pressure. Like we all know that we need to be doing the most, essentially, to be ahead of it and not get caught behind the wave, if you will. So I think that is maybe like triggering like a bigger interest in attending an event. I hosted a marketing hackathon at Reed a couple of weeks ago. And again, like the demand, the reception, and actually the feedback for that event was just so good because yeah, people were like, and all kind of levels of marketeer actually that were in that room, people just seemed really hungry to roll up their sleeves, to learn and to get involved. And I do think that AI is forcing, again, like forcing us back in a room, forcing us back into like a space where we can be productive, be intentional with other people about our learning. So yeah, if that answers your question, like I think that's definitely something that I'm seeing when it comes to people owning their own learning with AI.
I think it's something that, like you said, we lost for a little while, and actually people do want to move forward and they do want to learn, and they don't want to be so reliant on their cross-functional colleagues, because I think before a lot of marketeers kind of felt a little bit stuck. They kind of defaulted a little bit to the performance side because it was so hard to get something in the work, in the project sprints, or it was really difficult to get this cross-functional approach and moving forward with it. So it's definitely something I think a lot of marketeers will thrive in, because they have a much more potential to own things and deliver on it. So yeah, it's definitely something that I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I wanted to dive in a little bit to something that we've spoken around before and we've noticed is sort of a shift towards this super IC model. So I call it more of an expert role, but I wanted to dive in and see, is it something that you've experienced, and is it something that you think will continue to grow, as in senior people going in to deliver great work as opposed to having to go in and manage large teams?
Yeah, I think 100%. Like two thoughts. So where I've been most recently at Reed, there was a number of senior people who had previously led quite big teams, but within that within that org were actually more leading functions, like able to create impact and actually more impact because of not necessarily having the accountability that you have, like when you're running a team. Like, yes, you're going to have like dotted lines, but actually when you step away from everything else that managing people brings, I was seeing a lot of senior people have a lot of impact day to day. And there's a lot of talk, as you and I have both talked about before, about the agentic promise, where, you know, there's a future where we're all going to be running teams of agents. I think this is an interesting one. The tech's clearly not quite there yet, and it's definitely going to require a different level of leadership. It's not going to be directly like people leadership. But I think if that promise does end up delivering, then we're only going to see more super ICs because individuals are going to be able to do more with less. I guess it just comes down to whether, you know, how attractive that is as individuals. And I know a lot of leaders who get to a certain point and then are like, I actually just want to do the work. I want to roll up my sleeves. I want to get back to what I'm really good at. I would say I've been there myself as well, and sort of redefining, working through and specializing in product marketing. For me, it has incorporated that super IC stage of the journey. And I have to say, it's been like super energizing. And I think for anyone who maybe gets to a certain point and then is like, oh, actually, but let's like revisit, like, what is it that I love about my work? What is it that I love about marketing? I would really recommend considering that as a possibility. And yeah, I mean, I think in the age of smaller teams, whether that's because they're AI enabled or because the economy continues to be a bit crap, like it's being willing to put that hat on, I think becomes a super skill.
It's definitely becoming something that I think so many senior people, they get to a point and they have to review what they have done and where they're going. And actually, like you said, there are so many people that I've spoken to, either in advisory role or coaching, that want to move back into, or feel like they should move back into more of a super IC, because they love the delivery side, they love the impact side of it. Like superstars like you and other people who really understand how to make positive impact are going to make companies, because at the moment there's so many teams that really struggle to actually make any real positive change, and bringing in those experienced super ICs or experts are going to be critically important, especially when the teams do get smaller and you will be managing agents or agentic bots. So I think that's something that we're definitely going to sort of move in towards. Should we dive into a question I think a lot of people are skirting around but might help people? Do you actually think that AI is actually adding any value to marketing teams at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like, I'm an AI evangelist. Obviously, so yes, definitely, but it's happening in a very lumpy way. Like, it's not happening with any kind of consistency, at least from what I've seen. My experience has been that you're going to have like people like myself, and I can think of like other members of the team, where I've been, or the teams where I've been most recently, that really were quite far along the adoption curve. Like whether it's like trying new tools and then bringing new ideas, but actually like doing quite a lot of it in one's spare time and doing a lot of this testing. And then you've got other team members who are just like not really doing very much, like whether it's because they're not experimental or because like there hasn't necessarily been the structures in place to set out like the expectations at a team level, or because they just simply like don't know, they haven't experimented, and they just don't have that understanding, that do risk being if not left behind, then I think perceived to not be as quick as other people who have like created custom projects within. I mean, Gemini was what I was using most recently, and within different projects, I would have like different templates, so that if I typed in like marketing brief, for example, it would fill out like all of the fields for a brief, for product launch, for example. And I mean, that just saved me hours and hours on a weekly basis. I think like, who are the evangelists on your team? What is it that they're doing to speed up their work? And because it can really like make a huge amount of time. But I think I've maybe digressed slightly from the original question that you asked, which is, where is it making a difference? But yeah, I think for small teams, the ability to speed up, particularly if they're evangelists. But I think what needs to happen is like where small teams can get from idea to draft, like now within seconds, every single person on the team needs to be empowered to do that. Every specialist is going to be using specific software, whether it's like a CRM, Figma is another one, like whatever platforms people are using, like for content delivery and planning. But I think embedding that curiosity so that everyone is actually starting to experiment with the AI functions within those workflows is going to be what really gets people to speed up. Because, yes, I could say that the ways that marketing teams are using AI like broadly falls under like content production, research, and personalization and everything else. But actually, I think that's talking in very generalistic terms. Whereas from a capability standpoint, I think really what leaders need to do now is just be super supportive and incentivize that experimentation, which is, I think, really what the most successful teams are doing, are leveling up.
Yeah, I've seen similar. A lot of the time it's productivity gains, as in some people are making like leaps and bounds by using really specific tools. Others are diving into automations and workflows and trying to make huge progress in just by taking out a lot of the grunt work. I haven't told you this before, but having spoken at a couple of different conferences recently and a couple of different workshops, the one picture the one slide that everyone takes a picture of most is one of your LinkedIn updates of how to save all the time with different tools, your LinkedIn post. And
Nice.
one of the question I always get is, what are the best tools for marketeers to use? Do you want to dive into your tech stack? Because I think that's something that did well on LinkedIn, has done well in different sort of scenarios for me sharing your tech stack. So have you got a number of tools that's like your go-to and that can help people sort of advance themselves in AI and AI in marketing?
Yeah. So I would, thank you for saying that, by the way. Always happy to, happy to help. And I'm glad that was useful. I think one of the greatest workflows that's helped me out a ton over the past year is like the granola and LLM stack. So whenever I'm in a meeting or on a call, instead of just frantically like touch typing to download what was happening, I felt like I was just able to have much more tuned in conversations when I was using granola to record the call, to record the transcripts, and then like using that, copying it into whichever of like my projects on Gemini. Let's go with that. So I had like a specific project for a lot of my, PMM meetings, for example. Then I'd go in and I ask the questions, and maybe that would even be the basis for like the next steps, the brief. So yeah, so my first one would be like the granola and Gemini stack. Second one, I've been really loving, originally like Manus AI for slide creation. So Manus is kind of an agentic tool. I was finding for competitive intelligence, it was outperforming some of the other tools that I was using. I would now say that Perplexity and Grok have sort of replaced that for me. But what I really rated about Manus is that it would go off, like do the research, produce definitely 70% accurate. Like some of the specific social intelligence that I was looking at wasn't always spot on, but it was nearly there. But then you could just say like, transform this into a Google Slides, give it the style templates, and then you've basically got competitor intelligence deck within minutes. So that was one that really helped as well. And it's got some of the functionality, which I'm going to be exploring a bit more as well. And then, I think Notebook LLM, definitely want to add that one in. For anyone that's not used Notebook LM, you can put specialist knowledge. So whether it's like transcripts from certain calls, or like you can add links to YouTube videos, which you can't actually do on ChatGPT or Claude projects. And you can essentially create like a mastermind on specific topics that you can inquire and just have as like a very specific strategic companion. So one example here is that I recently did like an onboarding analysis for Veed, and that was like competitive analysis for other platforms in the space. But as well as just putting the deck into the notebook, I also added a couple of like podcasts and like resources, but on this very specific topic that we were thinking about with time to value. And what it then allows you to do is really like interrogate the strategy, think about it with regards to your own strategy in a way that you can't actually do with just straight up LLMs. Because if you say, if there's like an expert, like say April Dunford, let's give it as an example, like the data never comes back specifically. Whereas if you add in specific YouTube videos, like specific resources to Notebook, it really is hyper accurate. So there are a few, but I think for anyone doing competitive analysis right now, I think the update that I would make to that thing, the LinkedIn post that you referred to, it is to really keep experimenting complexity and Grok. Like I'm just seeing like the results are just actually crazily specific. There's a competitive intel prompt that I run quite regularly about like different AI video formats, for example, and actually running that through Grok, I get completely different data back than running it through Perplexity or definitely like ChatGPT. So yeah, so they're just a few.
Yeah, I love Notebook LM is like having doing the AI Moment podcast. I must talk about it in every other episode and how it keeps updating. So like highly, highly recommend it. Grok by X is the one tool that so many people don't like me referring to, but if you want to create something really quickly or you want something that's in the moment to be explained, and then because of all the history and the insights it's got, it's such a valuable tool. I always say to people, especially with Grok, is just make sure that the output that it puts, just make sure you act as the human in the loop, the editor, just to make sure that it hasn't pulled through something that maybe you wouldn't want to include in a work or corporate setting. But yeah, they're brilliant. They're brilliant tools, and completely agree. Perplexity almost replaced Google for me, like really early on, and I've not seen a tool that has thought about the customer use case as much. I completely agree.
Yeah, I mean, honorable mention for Gemini, because I mean, I think since the Canvas update, where you can now create slides within that workflow, I mean, I think I must have produced like 6 decks over the past few weeks. And actually, the capability and the time saved now is just absolutely epic. So, yeah, it's almost like the one that doesn't need to be said because it feels so obvious. But then I remember that actually not everyone is like heading it all day, every day, as I am. But and the capabilities of Gemini now, like in fact, something that I posted this morning was just that a video I created within the workflow within like 30 seconds. And although like you have limits obviously in within the workflow, it's still like the speed and also the convenience is just crazy. The ability to create slides, and I'm curious to try out the new agents piece as well. But the fact that it just has it all within where your documents are, I think means that that's probably the one. Like if anyone watching or listening is going to master one, it's probably if you got to know and master absolutely everything within your Google suite, you're probably going to be heads and shoulders uh, better at AI than anyone else on your team.
100%. With Gemini sitting in the places where you work, it just makes so much sense. And just on the sides point, Gamma took a huge leap ahead for such a long time. Gemini is definitely catching up, slowly but surely.
Yeah, and I love Gamma. Like I think that I loved that Lenny's podcast with Grant, the founder, and just his whole like worldview about time to value and about getting to that magic moment. I haven't really heard many other product leaders just talk with that level of precision, I guess, and like focus about how they develop their product. But when you use Gamma, you can really see that that's what they did. Like that's the approach because you do get to that magic moment super quick. It's delightful. The output is like really aesthetically great. I've been a user. I think I've churned as a paid user now, but yeah, simply because like it's in my, the Google capability is in my workflow and it's sort of good enough. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely like an incredible tool, an incredible example as well of actually a really useful generative AI tool, particularly for solopreneurs and founders.
I highly recommend that podcast if anyone wants to understand time to value. And I'd probably say now they're like the leading light to actually time to value and then editing for yourself because they know that it needs some tweaks. So it's definitely one of those areas, I think, whether you're a brand person or a PMM or someone in social, I think it's definitely it highlights so much in and around AI and AI marketing. You're a founder, you've got expanded future. A lot of what you do is in and around adding a lot of value and giving people excellent advice and giving them a guide for the future. Has your marketing background helped you with that as well? Is it something that has driven your success in that field?
Yeah, so as you say, Expanded Future is kind of my side hustle, but essentially supporting marketers on their own journeys with AI learning and building with AI specifically. And yeah, marketing's definitely been an awesome foundation. I think I'm very unafraid to build something, to launch something, to create something, because I've already brought to life and brought to market so many other products and brands. And I know that the confidence you have when you've done that over again goes above and beyond, what someone who's been working in the accounts department might have, for example, when it comes to shipping one's own projects. I would say that, being a product marketer very specifically, I am very thoughtful around positioning and the product market fit piece. What that has meant is that there are projects that I've worked on that I've ended up not actually shipping at the last minute because I've done testing, and then and then if something doesn't fit, then I will sort of can it and go back and iterate. And so it might go against the bias to shipping, which is sort of the popular kind of take of the day. But I also think that if you are, someone that's fairly senior in their career, and you are building something out as a side hustle, there is also that consideration of credibility. And so being thoughtful around what one is launching is, I think, becomes a bit more imperative. Um, yeah, but definitely marketing as a foundation, the fundamentals of distribution, how to get it into people's hands, um, and and how to create products and messaging that create value. And I think that's really the foundation.
Couldn't agree more. One of the skills that you're uniquely good at is communicating. I have to say, from everyone I've had worked with and connected with, you're one of those people. You're in the top sort of 5% of communicators. Do you have three tips that you can offer people to communicate more effectively, especially now that there's so much noise and a fight for attention with eyeballs? Have you got a couple of tips for people?
Well, firstly, that's such a nice thing to say, Danny. So thank you. Um, it's not something that I've heard that much before, and as you can hear, I'm umming and erring quite a lot, which I'm always working on. But no, I appreciate that. I am probably some variant of ADHD, on the multi-passionate side. That means that I'm very curious about a lot of things. That means that I've always had a lot of interests. It becomes a lot at a certain point, but it actually also means that my superpower, if you will, is that when I meet people, there's pretty much always something to connect upon, is what I've found. And I do love meeting people, talking to people, hearing where they're from. And yeah, I think I listen as well. And like yourself, I'm a trained coach, and that the skills that gives us when it comes to listening. And I've been told that I make people feel heard, which I really appreciate. But good communication really is good listening and understanding people's worldview. So if anyone listening is thinking about how they improve their communication skills, I'd say that it probably starts there, and then working on editing out the ums and ahs.
Great thing about a podcast editing tool, you can do that for free. So um, I take out so many, it's ridiculous. So I wouldn't worry about it. You also, when you're editing podcasts and video, you get to understand all your nervous tics. So I say quite a lot. So it's something that I end up having to slow down and remove. So I completely agree. One thing that I can say, as I know you, one thing I say that you're very good at doing is getting to know someone and getting to know a topic, and then being able to explain it very simply so it lands with them almost in their language. And I think maybe that does come from the coaching and the breadth of experience you have, but there's so many people that have lost that in this hyper personalized world. They rely on tools and systems to do that, as opposed to what makes marketeers win often is the one-to-one comms and explaining and winning over people who, in the PMM world, you need to explain it to them so it lands with them and solves their problems, as opposed to the perceived problems that people feel like you might be solving with a tool. Maybe that's one of your other superpowers, is being able to communicate that to people individually and understanding how to communicate to them as opposed to a bigger audience.
Yeah, I'd say that when it comes to marketing, that's definitely something that I would categorize as one of my superpowers, if you will. And it is interesting, like when I think back to when I was at the BBC, even, and that was sort of my first experience of having to really consolidate like very dense, like strategic papers, strategic reviews, assessments, research, and condense that into a press release. So I was communications officer um, for a little while at the trust. And yeah, like, that was my first experience. And at first I thought it's because I'm a bit of an outsider to this whole um, media policy world that I need to simplify this. And that's, that's why. And so I was just always thinking like, this is just too simple. Like, I think the way that I put this together, like condensed it, like that's actually too simple. Actually, as time's gone on and as I've worked and brought various levels of complexity of, of products to market, from, Read, which was sort of AI video, which is sort of slightly on the more like less dense side, to Sust Global, which was like really dense, like climate intelligence APIs. I've realized that that has actually been a consistent skill that I've been able to bring. Like, how do you translate the most complex technology into a value proposition that people actually understand what it does for them, why they want it in their lives? And I think that that is also a skill that I see among the best product marketeers, and among the people who are celebrated for doing this, actually. So, but yeah, I think the BBC was definitely a really good grounding for that.
You've worked with loads of different brands in some of the most competitive spaces. So whether it's Eventbrite, BBC, Get, etc., and obviously more recently Veed, are there a couple of other tips or tricks that you can give people around like what the most important skills are? I think once you hit a certain point in your career, you kind of you don't think about your skills, you think about other people's skills. But are there sort of 2 or 3 skills that you think are the most important that people can really work on going into like 2026?
I think having a cross-functional perspective is really key. And I think that the reason that I love product marketing so much is because it's so inherently cross-functional. Like, you really need to be supporting like your sales team, and therefore like understanding like what their pain points are, what they need. You're partially embedded within the product team. So again, being like super close from discovery through to launch. And then obviously with marketing teams as well. But when I think back to the times when I was doing more generalist marketing roles, actually being more cross-functional and being more intentional about shaping those relationships, I think is, it would have been like more helpful in a way. Because there was definitely roles when it started to feel like really siloed, and sometimes it might feel like there isn't time to go like attend the weekly product meeting. But actually, I think it's in your interest as a marketeer to take that cross-functional lens, because it actually just gives a much better perspective for everything else that you're doing. Um, and I think like connected, well, to the idea of like being, actually, no, you can edit that bit. I think the second thing would be like in this age of AI advancement, like I think everyone is like, a lot of people are looking for support. So if you can like get expert at like one specific aspect of AI within your own domain, but then so that you're able to support other people, whether it's like one specific workflow, one specific tool, but really be able to master that and then support others. If it's an automation tool, for example, there would certainly be other people across the organization where you could support, but also get support. I think that that's probably a really useful thing to be doing, to carve out your own expertise, to support your own learning journey, but to be able to help others as well.
So if I was to replay some of those tips, it would basically be a great cross-functional colleague, because having been able to understand them, attending meetings, being able to translate what's been said and what's going to happen is critically important. And then helping people to become a specialist and then teach other people is going to be critically important, especially the way that AI is going to be reshaping a lot of marketing teams or a lot of disciplines cross-functionally. I have a sort of a feeling that a lot of more senior people are going to struggle to adapt as opposed to the more junior people in this sort of space, and especially with AI coming to the forefront and already reshaping what some teams and departments are doing. Do you think there's any blind spots that leaders have, or business leaders or department leaders have with AI, like currently, or you're experiencing in helping people move away from those sort of struggles?
Well, I think that the lumpiness and the inconsistency of adoption, it just seems to be like a really consistent trend. Like even in the highest growth tech companies right now, adoption is really inconsistent. So I think there's a blind spot where business leaders are like, here's a tool, and then just assume that everyone's going to be using it the same, but without necessarily like understanding where people are at, without there being any kind of like forcing function almost to like bring people together to collaborate, to learn and to go on the journey together. I think that's a blind spot. I mean, I've also met people who, when I asked like where they're at with their AI journey in their organization, they're like, we have an agency do it all for us. And they've literally outsourced, whether it's like content creation or whether it's like some of the workflow automation, to an agency or a consultancy. And I think that's quite dangerous for the individuals involved, because it's not allowing them to have that opportunity to upskill and learn themselves. But also by taking it out of the organization, they're just not building that knowledge that they're really going to need to be competitive in the next era. Yeah, I think anyone like outsourcing AI, instead of finding an evangelist internally that could do it, that could support, I think that is definitely a blind spot as well. But there's obviously like a huge blind spot around dark AI and the fact that if certain tools aren't being allowed within organizations, that people are going to go ahead and use that anyway. And so I would doubt that that's happening in organizations that have got Google Suite, just because like Gemini is so advanced. Although I spoke to some people the other week who were a very high growth AI company, and they didn't actually know that you could have the equivalent of projects within Gemini. So I think that also speaks to the fact that we might have all of these tools at our fingertips, but has your organization, like, have they actually like gone through and done like a thorough training of like, this is all the cool stuff that you can do with AI in the Google workspace? I haven't seen that. I haven't heard of that. I think it's just an assumption that people are just going to pick it up and run with it. But people probably need a bit more support than leaders realize.
100%. Something I recommend to companies is you need captains and champions. Captains to revolve and actually help everyone else adopt it and be like the leaders. And that's kind of weekly or fortnightly leadership. And then there's the champion side, which is you need people like evangelists who are going to champion it and then help coach other people along the way, their teammates or their cross-functional colleagues, because without that, you're not really going to have anyone who's got their finger on the pulse, but also be able to help move some things along. So make a list of problems that you're all encountering or a number of you encounter, and then you can address them that way. Because otherwise, like you said, bad AI or shadow AI is going to be something that comes in. And I've seen it where people have been told, no, they can't use a tool because it isn't approved by IT. Then they go off and they use company data, and then they get in trouble because they're only trying to progress their work and their level of work, but actually they've done it the wrong way. So I think if you can have this sort of ownership and championing of knowledge, I think that's the only way, like you said, to really drive it. And I'd personally worry if you're outsourcing it to an agency, as soon as something breaks, you're onto a bit of a loser, unfortunately. With AI, and we're entering this more with less, there's going to be less people, less budget, but there's expectations of more productivity, so more output. Do you think teams are going to get bigger, or do you think they're going to sort of get smaller in 2026? Do you have like an opinion on that?
And I think there's two ways that it can play out. And really, I've heard founders talk about both. And I know people being impacted by both. The first is where there's a pressure for efficiencies and there is a pressure to make cost savings, and finance realize that by automating, they can potentially lose headcount. And so whether it's to show investors that they can make those sorts of reductions, then they will get rid of people to show that they can still accelerate and capture those efficiencies by using AI. And I think we've already seen examples of Klarna being one particularly notable one, but there are plenty of others who are going down this route. And I think it remains to be seen, like what success that gains. But I mean, again, in a low sort of economic point right now where we're at, it's clearly a temptation. I think the other opportunity, which hopefully a lot of businesses will also capture, that maybe don't have the same sort of risks or constraints as businesses who are seeing declining growth, like where businesses are performing well with their existing headcount. If you can get everyone to be 10 times more effective, then there is theoretically the possibility that your company could become 10 times more profitable if you make the right bets, you train people the right way. And I can't remember the name of the company, but there was a really great case study that I heard recently about an organization who was very early in their AI enablement and equipping the whole workforce, made no reductions, but has just seen like insane growth. And I think what's really needed is that some of these case studies are amplified, and that business leaders are able to see that actually, if we're smart and very intentional and disciplined about our AI rollout, then actually there are huge gains to be made if we keep the team size as it is. And of course, it's not necessarily going to be the case that everyone on your team is ready to be like an AI native, which everyone needs to be in this instance to get 10x gains. So yes, there may be replacements, but actually not reduction, because you still need the same people to capture the potential gains. And there's a lot of organizational change that's required to get to that level of expansion. But the possibilities are totally there. I don't think there's going to be a binary outcome. I think that some companies who are seeing declining growth are going to have to go the reduction route. But I would hope that they're smart enough to really make AI, like to be really intentional about their rollout of AI to actually make it worth it. Because they're going to continue to see declining growth if they don't. But I will be excited to see continuing number of case studies where organizations bullish about growth with AI, bullish about the possibilities, can continue to demonstrate what's possible.
And if they're struggling, they can hire someone like you to help them on their journey, right?
Absolutely, Danny. Yeah, here to help.
Looking forward for 6 to 12 months, are there areas that gets you most excited within marketing, AI, and business?
I think I'm excited about what we just mentioned, to continue to see case studies where organizations are creating outsized impact by doing more with, whether it's less people, less resource, using AI. That would be one. But at an individual level, I am really excited about like the possibilities for the full stack marketeer who is fully AI equipped to create, so much with just like a simple stack. And I think the ability for people like myself that, I'm not a designer by trade, but actually with tools like Midjourney or Figma as well, like what people like me can now bring to life with design tools, despite that being, probably this part of my marketing skill set where I have like the least knowledge. I think that that's actually going to be really fascinating to see what the full stack marketer is going to be capable of in the next era. And in general, like seeing the innovation, like seeing what smaller teams are going to be able to do. I think that's something that I'm excited about. I'm excited for the creativity. Yes, there's a lot of talk about AI slop, but actually a lot of that, well, there is a fair amount of AI creativity that's actually really incredible. And I want to keep seeing and checking out those examples that are clearly AI, but actually are like clearly really creative, like really inspirational. And I want to carve out more time to really dive into that and get inspired by that, because I think we are at a point right now where you can resist the wave and moan about the wave and like moan about AI slop. And of course, like we all get frustrated when we see really poorly written AI generated content. But the other side of that is like some of this stuff is just crazy and like incredible and like really visually stunning. And so like where do we go? Like how can we get that inspiration and continue to progress and evolve as marketers by actually jumping on what's being there, bringing it back to our teams and sort of adopting more of a yes and approach.
Yes, and is my favourite way of describing it. One example that you used, something I'm doing at the moment is if I've got long documents, I put it into Notebook LM and I get it to add the infographic at the top. So it gives someone the visual explainer as well. So I think that's something that people can do. It's free. So you can leverage those types of things. So to remove yourself away from just creating slop or tweaking and adding filters with these really long prompts that are being shared at the moment. I think there's some really great use cases of using these tools to actually make it more applicable and more transferable or translatable to teammates or cross-functional way of working. Have you got one or two quick tricks or tips that you'd offer for people with AI tools or with AI to help them be more deliberate or more successful in their marketing role?
So I think when it comes to strategy and planning, like number one, don't just give AI or your LLM a prompt that says like, write me out my 2026 plan. Start with your own inspiration, start with your own insights, start with your own beliefs. I use a pen and pencil all the time. I always have a notepad next to my desk. I'm always jotting down notes, and I'll often just like take a photo of that, upload it to Claude and say like, this is this is my start point. Like, let's brainstorm. When it comes to AI, don't don't just default to thinking that the LLM's are an answer machine. I've found that my own thought processes have augmented. I can just feel, I almost feel smarter actually since having pretty much like every hour of my working day, I'm chatting in some form to Claude or Gemini. But by starting with like, this is my idea, and then like talking at a higher level, like I think we're actually able to increase our critical reasoning. And I think like the studies that I've seen about like cognitive decline, I think it all just really comes from like treating the LLMs like an answer machine. And I was guilty. Like, I don't know if this is part of the adoption curve we all have to go on, but I definitely like presented and churned out some things that I'm not proud of now. And this is going back like, 2 years. But I also feel like in my own adoption, maybe we had to go through that route of, okay, just let's get it to do everything for us before having the quality filter come in and being like, no, actually, no, this is good enough. But as a result of going through that process, yeah, like I say, like I really get so much value now through being able to expand upon that. I always ask for multiple options. I never take the first answer. My approach is always to be like, yeah, suggest like 10 options, because we all know that like, even when we're doing this for ourselves, like if you write out like a list of like 10 possible headlines, which is, what I would always do when it came to creating copy myself, like writing out 10, working from it on that basis is kind of the best way to get your own like pattern recognition, and then to be able to embed your own quality filter in that way. The second one is I think we're really early in being able to know what's possible at speed. And so when it comes to things like meetings, like the workflow that I mentioned before with Granola and Gemini, like I think that there's going to be so much more that we can do when we actually think about like the value of the transactions that we have, of the meetings, in terms of like taking out our own like inspirational takeaways and our own kind of knowledge, that I think we're only just really starting to understand, well, actually what's possible when you think about like the whole of a lot of the interactions that we have. Because before with pen and paper, you'd maybe like have a few bullet points, but I think we're just going to be able to get so much more nuance and just get so much more like depth of strategic insight if we're like really intentional with tools like that. But I think with voice, I think Whisper Flow is one tool that I hadn't mentioned, but that I've started to use a lot more. And actually just like how much more we're able to do through voice. So whether it's, Granola transcripts, whether it's like actually just like shipping because we're using our voice to type instead of actually typing, we're really at the edge of something that's going to be quite crazy in terms of like personal productivity. But again, like I think it's important that people experiment now, because even a few weeks ago, like someone posted on that post that I think you mentioned, Danny, about Whisper Flow, and I was like, oh yeah, but I really like typing. But now I've been using Whisper Flow like day in, day out, and I'm like, wow, this is shoot, you can get so much more done. But I think it's important to try and like not resist if you have that like initial resistancy, because I think again, it'll happen quite fast. And we're all going to be voice pilled. And then if you're not and you're still typing, like, again, I think it's just that risk of maybe not going with that flow. So I definitely recommend that everyone has a little go with Whisper Flow and sees how much more productive they can be. And I think there'll still be a role for typing for me at least. But actually for a bunch of things now, it's like, oh yeah, this is, makes things 10 times faster.
I definitely agree. A lot of the time, I write to think often. So I'll type something out, and then once I've got it cemented, then it's something I can like, move forward with. I know a number of people who, because we've spoken for thousands of years, but we've only written for a lot less. So often it's much easier to articulate something by voice, and some people are far more articulate than I am by speaking. So it's like their perfect use case. They can get much further forward by speaking into a device. Like whether it's Whisperflow or even Apple Notes is really good at sort of transcribing those types of things now. So whether it's writing an email really quickly, you can say it, dictate, and it sends it, whether it's putting it into another tool and it translates it into slides, etc. These are all great sort of use cases I think people haven't necessarily thought of because it isn't like their natural working environment or in their process. So it's definitely something I think people will be taking advantage of, maybe more from home than in an office, because it's something that's still a little bit unusual, I suppose, by speaking out loud versus typing.
Actually, I was listening to a podcast with the Whisperflow founder, 10A, yesterday, and he said that there's actually like whole offices now where people have like their little USB mic plugged in, or just like whispering into the mic like that, because it really does pick up like the faintest whisper. And yeah, so that's interesting.
The future of the office is going to be also changed by AI, which is going to be really interesting to see. Should we run for a quick fire round to finish up?
Sure, let's do it.
Great. What metric are people overlooking the importance of?
I think right now it's the time to value. So how quick do you get to that magic moment in your product experience that's going to make you sticky and stand out?
What are you most excited about the future of marketing?
The death of generic content and the rebirth of highly creative, eye-capturing content.
Awesome. If you had one tool to get yourself off a desert island, which tool would you use?
Can I just say the whole Google AI workspace?
Perfect. I'm sure Gemini and Sundar would be very happy with you saying that. What is the one business tactic or marketing tactic that's being overlooked most at the moment?
So I think it's like focused on first principles. What is it that we're trying to achieve? Not getting overwhelmed by the tools and by everything that is happening in the wider space and FOMO. What is it that we're trying to do specifically? And then figuring out the best way to do that, starting with what our customers need and then ending in like, well, how is it that we actually fulfill that need?
Great. Is there a common theme that you're seeing as hindering companies time and time again?
I think it's clarity on objectives, like that mission shift from the start of the year when everyone like has a specific view around OKRs, but then by Q4, there's just been a kind of a shift, and what's happened over the course of the year has really not. It's drifted off the focus of the main name of the game.
If there was one area of product or marketing or product marketing, depends on which way you want to look at it, you could change, what would it be?
By breaking down the silos and improving communication between teams.
Couldn't agree more. And what's one question I should have probably asked you but didn't?
And maybe like, what's the most common mistake that companies make when implementing AI?
What is it then?
Well, I think trying to automate broken processes instead of fixing them, whether it's like missing data or whether it's just the fact that there's so much inherent messiness that hasn't been addressed first. Like automating workflows only works when you've got clean workflows to begin with.
Could not agree more at all. That's exactly what I've been saying recently too. So completely agree. If people want to reach out, they want to work with you, they want to collaborate with you on an AI project or PMM project, where should people reach out to you and get in contact with you, Katie?
Reach out to my LinkedIn. Feel free to link it in the show notes.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Katie. There's so much value in there. I know a lot of people will, it'll be one that they come back to over and over. So thanks for your time. And I look forward to hearing how people work with you in the future.
Thanks, Danny.